Stay tuned to see how I made this. What's up? Welcome back to another CCK video. If this is your first time joining me, hey, I'm Whitney. If it's not, welcome back. Thank you so much. Glad to have you. So as you can see from my thumbnail, I made my own do-it-yourself backdrop, and the purpose of it was to have something that is portable and easy to transport while also versatile. I would try to look up some things online that I could do or buy, and just wasn't finding anything that met my vision for what I wanted my backdrop to be for. So the backdrop is actually for the furniture that I will be flipping. I'm still in my parents' house, so I don't have like a temporary backdrop that I could create like in the garage or anything like that, and I don't have a lot of space because we do park the cars in the garage. So I wanted to make something portable that I can just pull out when I need to take some pictures and put away, and did not take up a lot of space. I mean, it's a board essentially, so it's flat. It's not going to take up a lot of space, so I can just kind of shove it wherever I need to and pull it out as needed. But I also did not want to spend a lot of money in order to do it, so I came up with the idea of just making it a do-it-yourself and using a lot of the things that I had around the house. I bought a lot of equipment and tools from Amazon, so I had a lot of Amazon boxes left over, and as well as other products, but they're just empty boxes laying around. So I figured I need something that's sturdy. Why not just use the boxes that I had on hand? There were a lot of pros and cons that went into the making of this backdrop, and I'll definitely be sharing those with you if you stick around towards the end before I show you the final product. So I definitely suggest staying tuned for those lessons learned, so you can learn from my mistakes and hopefully save some time and money if you do decide to do something similar and make your own backdrop. And with that, let's get into the video. For step one here, we're gonna need some boxes, tape, measuring tape, and a box cutter. I'll start off by cutting off the frayed edges so we can start with a clean edge, and this is actually the biggest box that I had. So I'm measuring it out to see what are we starting with as far as our measurements. Originally, I planned on building a 6x8 foot backdrop, and so you'll see me measure and remeasure to get to that dimension. Now you can see here I am taping up the edges that are actually bent. They came bent with the box, so to add a little bit of support, I'm taping up all the edges that are already bent to reinforce it. And then I'm cutting up the Amazon boxes that I had to add to the side. Now all of these measurements that I'm making and the taping that I'm doing is for the first layer of my boxes. As we continue through the video, you'll see that I create 3 different layers of all the same dimensions for the backdrop. And the reason for this is because if I just used 1 layer of boxes, the backdrop would be very flimsy. I think 2 would add some more support but wouldn't be as sturdy as I would want it to be, so I finally decided on 3. If you do decide to recreate this, I would say a minimum of 3 layers is required. I'm not really sure how much you would want to go up to, because then you're getting into the territory of how heavy do you want your backdrop to be. So that's completely up to you, but 3 seemed to work for me. This is what we have so far for my first layer. You can see that the edges are not straight, and that's because I cut them down, but this is what all of the boxes together look like. Now I'm Tetrising my second layer and laying the boxes on top of the first layer to strategically figure out how I'm going to tape these down. I want to make sure that the edges that I'm taping together for the second layer do not overlap on the edges that I taped together for the first layer, so that way it's more secure. If I did end up doing that where the edges were layered on top of each other in the same exact spots, it would be more likely that my backdrop would bend in that area, and thus defeating the purpose of having layers. So after figuring out how I wanted my second layer placed and then taped down. I didn't record that part because it was exactly the same as the first layer, so I didn't do that, but I'm now layering my second layer, which is a set of mailing boxes that I had just left over from when I used to make actual products for CCK. And I taped those down with duct tape this time instead of packing tape because I actually ran out of packing tape. So I had to go out and get some more duct tape. And this is the final product on both sides, and this is all 3 layers taped together. Now I'm going in with some Rust-Oleum 2x Ultra Coverage Camouflage paint, spray paint, in a olive green, army green kind of color, and I didn't actually think about this before I started. I needed one side to be mostly white or all white, and I needed the other side to be this green for the backdrop canvas, and I actually wasted all that paint for the side when I could have just flipped it and done the other side in green and kept this white and just spray painted over the tape, but you know, you live and you learn. So I would say if you're doing this, make sure that you pay attention to what will allow you to do the least amount of work and get the greatest impact afterwards. So if I had done this again, I would have actually done this side that's showing and spray painted it green, and the other side just spray painted over that tape white. That would have saved me having to layer it with the paper, as you'll see when we're coming up. So right now I took the canvas and folded it over the edge, and I'm using a staple gun to secure the edges. So before I staple, I make sure that I pull it tight so that there isn't any loose pieces, and it's pretty straight and even on the other side when I flip it over. So this is the backing that I'm going to be using. It is a peel and stick of brick wall pattern. And right now I originally had decided to line it up and peel and stick it all the way down because I put that white paper down, which I stapled down. It was giving me some issues because underneath the paper it was not flat. So as I was trying to smooth it out, it just was wrinkles everywhere, and here I come into that issue where I'm trying to re-peel and stick and the paper ends up coming up, so I cut it up and I had to get creative. It just was a lot more than I needed it to be. So eventually I just decided to leave the peel and stick backing on it and staple it all the way across instead of using the adhesive to stick it to the backboard. So you can see it here, I unroll the whole roll of the peel and stick, staple at the top, flatten it out, and then staple it at the bottom. I cut off the frayed edges, and then I go ahead and lay the next layer next to it. And now I'm just making sure that it measures up, so you can't really tell where it starts and stops width-wise. It's supposed to be a seamless pattern, and once I figured out how to do it, it lined up pretty well. Alright, thank you for sticking along with me this far and watching my creative process into creating my do-it-yourself backdrop for furniture. So what can you learn from my do-it-yourself experience? One, definitely come up with your measurements before you start creating this backdrop, because regardless of how many times I measured and remeasured and remeasured and remeasured, my measurements were not coming out right for the dimensions. So make sure that you have in your mind exactly what your measurements are going to be. I started off wanting to make a 6x8 foot backdrop, just thinking, yeah, that should be easy. I didn't take into account that I'm not that tall, and it would probably be really hard for me to move it around. So I actually reduced it down to the size of the sheet backdrop that I got, the leafy one, which was 5x7. So it's like 2 inches around the edges shorter, so that way I could fold around the sheet on the edge. But make sure that you have those dimensions down. It'll save you a lot of time and materials and effort. Trying to overachieve and make a 6x8, wasted a lot of tape doing that, wasted boxes that I didn't need, and I wasted time when I could have just been moving on to the next step. So just make sure you definitely have those measurements down beforehand and keep measuring as you are going through. I was using my tape measure, but it wasn't really helpful as I kept changing the dimensions in my mind of what I wanted to be. So have those dimensions and always measure repeatedly throughout this process. The next thing I would say is use the least amount of boxes as possible. I used so many small boxes trying to be cheap. Try and get the largest size box as possible and get many of those instead of trying to Tetris it, like jigsaw them together. The less boxes that you have to take together, the less it compromises the integrity of the entire backdrop itself, because you won't have as many weaker points where those seams are meeting and it's being taped. Go to any big box store and get you a couple boxes. When I say a couple, a lot of boxes. They have them for like $2 or $3 at some of these stores, and you can get some pretty big boxes. Again, make sure you have those dimensions before you go. Figure out how many boxes you're gonna need and just grab them and do them that way. It just saves a lot of time, and it'll be a lot easier, and your structure will be stronger, so it'll probably last a little bit longer. The next tip that I have is to make sure that you cover up those boxes before you put your backdrop sheet, or if you are using those peel and stick pages, before you put those down, make sure that your boxes are covered. So if you have any logos on your boxes, any words, the tape itself that you're using to tape the boxes together, they're all one color, so it doesn't look weird when you do put that backdrop over it. If I didn't spray paint the leafy side green, if I take that backdrop out and use broad daylight to light my pictures, those words and symbols would definitely be bleeding through in the back and make the pictures look really weird. So make a uniform backing before you do put your final cloth or whatever up there. Decide beforehand if you are going to actually peel and stick or not. I originally decided I was going to actually use the peel and stick it onto the cardboard, but because I had put that paper down, because I ran out of spray paint, it was just really hard to get it seamless. And even if I hadn't put the paper down and the backing was already all white, I think it still would have been hard because the surface wasn't flat anyway, with the indentations from the tape and from the different size boxes. I would suggest decide beforehand if you are going to leave that backing up. If I had known I would have had all these issues with the paper, I would have saved myself a whole bunch of time instead of stapling all 86 of those pages. I don't know if that's the real number, but it felt like 86. Instead, I would have just went ahead and stapled that peel and stick directly onto the box. Because I left the backing on there, you couldn't even see through to the other side to where the box actually was. And that would have saved me so much time, because a lot of it was me trying to figure out how to line the bricks up together so they were seamless. I cut a lot of that out. Decide beforehand what route you're gonna go. Me personally, I would just say leave the peel and stick on there and just tape it down or staple it down as is. And the last tip I have is the type of tape you're gonna use. So I used 2 different types of tape. I used packing tape and I used duct tape. I also bought a lot of masking tape that I didn't end up using because even though I had bought it, I researched after I bought it that the masking tape is made out of paper and it's not sturdy for that reason, and so it would have been the weakest option to use to tape all the boxes together. So if you're going to use tape, use duct tape or Gorilla Tape. I went ahead and just bought a whole bunch of duct tape to tape them together. Packing tape does the job, but it's definitely not the strongest. I can tell the difference in the areas that I had packing tape because I had to like double and triple wrap it with the tape. Be a lot stronger. I think that's it for my tips. If you found my advice useful, if this is something that you're gonna try doing, your own do-it-yourself backdrop, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you and see what you found valuable from this video. But with that, we're gonna take it to the final results. So check it out, my do-it-yourself reversible portable backdrop.